noise. If you consider the amount of media any of us is exposed to on an average day, the quest to find meaning amongst the noise is a familiar challenge. Navigating information overload requires a single important skill: curation. Curation is the ultimate method of transforming noise into meaning. The Mini Bottle Gallery only displays about 20% of Rignis's full collection at any time and carefully keeps the rest in storage. This thoughtful curation makes the experience of seeing them valuable. Without curation, the meaning would be lost and the experience meaningless. An accidental trend curator. It was only on my flight home from Oslo that I realized how important curation had become for my own work. Just a few months earlier, I had published the first edition of my non-obvious trend report, inspired by an idea to publish a blog post from the many ideas I had collected over the past year but never written about. What I was already doing, without realizing it, was collecting intriguing ideas and saving them in perhaps the most disorganized way possible by writing them down, printing them out, or ripping them out of magazines and keeping them in a folder on my desk. In producing that first report, my ambition became to describe patterns in the stories I had collected that went beyond the typical obvious observations I was always reading online. My goal was to find and develop insights that others either hadn't yet noticed or that were not getting the attention they warranted. To get a different output, sometimes you need a different input. On that flight home from Norway, I realized that my accidental method for getting different input, collecting ideas for a year and waiting months before analyzing them, could actually be the very thing that would set my insights apart and make them truly non-obvious. The non-obvious trend report was born from my desire to curate trends on a timeline and scale that others weren't. Science's dirty little secret. Now, if you happen to be an analytical person, this explanation will hardly seem rigorous enough to be believable. How can collecting ideas and waiting possibly be a recipe for developing genuine insights? What about proper research? What about trend panels and using a global army of spotters? What about the science? Well, it turns out science isn't always done the way we think it is, and that may be a good thing. In early 2013, a PhD candidate named Becky Port gathered and published 75 examples of scientists using the hilariously viral hashtag overly honest methods to share some brutally honest truths about the realities of scientific research. Among the compilation of tweets Port shared online were these entertaining soundbites. Samples were prepared by our collaborators at MIT. We assumed no contamination because, well, they're MIT. Hashtag overly honest methods at Paul Coxon. Our representative device is representative of the ones which didn't immediately explode. Hashtag overly honest methods at AJ Decon. Barbados was selected as a case study because the authors had a naive hope that it might justify some field work there. Hashtag overly honest methods at ML Cubic. We use jargon instead of plain English to prove that a decade of grad school and postdoc made us smart. Hashtag overly honest methods at E. Perlst. When you think about the discipline that goes into scientific research and the many years of study that lead to a PhD, it is easy to see research as a task only performed by robot-like perfectionists. The truth of scientific research, just like the truth behind many equally complex areas of study, is that the people behind them are far more human than we tend to admit. Trends, like science, are not always perfectly observed phenomena that fit neatly into a spreadsheet to be described. This doesn't mean they don't have immense value. Great science always involves great observation. Scientists learn to observe the results of their experiments and then work to describe them with hypothesis and proof as best they can. Sometimes they do it, and sometimes they don't. For all the similarities between trends and science, this is only half the story. Discovering real trends takes a willingness to combine curiosity with observation and add insight to create valuable ideas that you can then test to ensure they work. This is vastly different from the method we often mistakenly believe is behind most work with trends, trend spotting. This phrase is a symbol of some of the many myths we tend to believe about those who predict or describe trends. Let's explore the 5 most common of these myths. The 5 myths of trend spotting. As a writer and speaker, I spend a lot of time seeking stories. When it comes to trends and predicting the future, the people who do this are often called trend spotters. Despite what you may